If you're like me and are really interested in living a healthier life, maybe super into kind of the science around body performance, or even into something like running or just different fitness, then you probably come across the concept of the barefoot shoe. But also, if you're like me, even if you find that intriguing, you might not have the money to invest in something that, one, has mixed results from people, and two, is just a pretty pricey thing to put money down on. So this is for the people who have an interest in foot health and how it pertains to the rest of your body's health and performance, but don't necessarily have the funds or the desire even to go down the route of purchasing barefoot shoes. This idea has been on my mind for a little bit, and I'm really excited to dive into it today. So without further ado, let's get started. So first of all, if you're new here, my name is Catherine Faye, and this channel is all just about kind of simple, natural, healthy living and lifestyle. So essentially, I am just a regular person just like you, but is always trying to learn more and dive deeper into living a little bit more naturally, a little bit more healthy. I will say I was trained as a professional massage therapist, so I know probably a little bit more than most people on just anatomy and things like that, so that plays a factor into it. But for the most part, this is always just my own research, and I definitely always encourage you to look at multiple sources for all subjects and make sure you're looking at sources that are not all just gonna, go along with each other, but ones that might butt heads a little to get a full picture on a subject. But I hope this video can have some helpful information for you for whatever your journey is with foot health. So first off, let's talk about why do we care about feet? Why are feet important? So in super basic terms, your feet are just the base. It is the base of your whole body, and it's your balance of your body. And everything kind of comes back to connecting to the feet. Of course, our bodies are all connected in some way, but we know, just for example, if the bones and or muscles in the foot is just a little bit off, it already starts throwing the rest of you off from the leg up. So the muscles in our legs start being off, then in our upper legs, our thighs, goes to hips, back, everywhere. So it's really important that we have a good base, a good foundation. Just like you wouldn't want to build an amazing house on a non-stable foundation, that's the same thing when it comes to our bodies, really, if you think about it. You can get good exercise in, but if your feet are off, it's not going to be the best form. You're not going to have the best posture. You're not going to execute your exercises to the best form, to the best ability, because that foundation is not there. And unfortunately, we are seeing problems with a lot of people's feet. If we look at it, there's bunions, there's crowding, and so I see where the barefoot shoe is taking off, because it is a way to counteract these problems that we are seeing. So I have never actually owned a real barefoot shoe, as they're called, and that is mostly just financial. I would love to own one in the future, just because I think they'd really work well for my lifestyle, things that I do. So first, let me talk about just some of the positives that I do see from barefoot shoes, just from my personal perspective. They are good for if you have very limited to no outdoor space that you can walk around barefoot. So we'll get into it a little bit later when I go into all of my tips on exactly what you can do without having to buy an expensive shoe. But it is definitely good for you and your feet to be barefoot, especially on natural surfaces, just because that kind of terrain is not hard and flat like our man-made terrain. It's got some give to it, it's got different bumps and grooves, and it does help build up the muscles in your feet and allow the toes and everything to spread out when walking outside barefoot. But for people who live maybe in cities or just have really small areas, just don't have the ability to be able to walk outside barefoot very much, that could be a good option. Same for if you spend most of the day at a certain type of job that you have to have shoes on. That's most jobs, I guess you would say. But in that case too, if you're spending hours and hours and hours all day having to wear a shoe, opposed to wearing something with a tight toe box and lots of cushion in it, you could transition to a barefoot shoe. You obviously have to wear shoes in that situation, but that would allow your feet to kind of spread out. And also, if it's just too cold, it's the situation for me here. it is autumn, going closer and closer towards winter now, and being barefoot outside is pretty much not something I can do right now. So in that circumstance too, a barefoot shoe can give that same effect of walking outside barefoot, but give a little bit more warmth to your feet, so you're not stepping right on the cold ground and freezing your feet off. Now, here are some reasons the barefoot shoe could be kind of overrated, right? So, of course, the one thing is they're expensive, and I'm sure there's more niche brands out there that are maybe bridging that gap a little bit, but from my personal researching, looking around, they are definitely an investment. And I will say this though, as somebody whose wardrobe is 99.9% either handmade or secondhand, either given to me or got at a secondhand store, that shoes are a really good thing to invest in, actually. And don't get me wrong, pretty much all my shoes are actually secondhand as well. I got my sneakers that I wear every time I walk at a yard sale for like $2. But truthfully, for shoes that you're going to be wearing often all the time, shoes are a good investment to make. And so if you're able to do that, I would say maybe looking down this path is a good option for you. However, there's some other cons that I do want to talk about before I get into the tips. So one, there is definitely a lot of people who have reported to have caused themselves injury while using these barefoot shoes. And I think there's multiple reasons for this. I think a lot of these people, one, are athletes who are usually running, training for running typically. So they're going from their typical running routine, which is most likely quite frequent, and their body is very used to probably the support in their sneaker they have now. And I think a lot of these people either completely just transition from support sneaker to barefoot shoe with no in between, or they transition too fast. And this could definitely cause injury. I also think too there is something to be said that, yes, I'm definitely a very natural girl, right? You probably know this at this point. But unfortunately, where a lot of people are walking, running, standing most of their day is not a natural surface. So it does make sense in a lot of cases to have a support in the shoe because of the ground being not ideal, right? There's so many examples of good, I guess, inventions that people have made to help humans get through certain environmental shifts, right? So, example, winter. People would not be able to be doing recreational activities in the winter without all the gear that people have created that keep us warm. For example, hats, nice coats, and super insulated coats. Even when it comes to like camping gear, some sleeping bags that are getting super good at under freezing temperatures. Just those things, for example. They're not bad because they're man-made, and it doesn't make you less natural of a person to enjoy those activities using man-made things. So I would argue that there's definitely areas that people have kind of industrialized. Whether you think that's good or bad, that's up to you, but they have. And because there's these big slabs of flat concrete, if some people want to participate in these recreational activities, it makes sense to use something man-made invention that can help support the parts of the foot that could take a beating or just be incorrectly, trying to compensate for it being a flat, hard surface. So in those cases too, barefoot might not be the right way to go because a natural foot is being thrown into a not natural environment. Okay, so now let's get into the real meat of this video, which is how you can maintain or develop healthy feet without necessarily having to go down the route of buying something expensive like barefoot shoes. So the good things you can see here are that the toes are not crunched together. You really don't want the toes to be going over each other or even just really tight. And also you want those toes to have a good range of motion to really be able to spread out. So a good test for you to kind of see where you're at is just have your feet on the ground normal, or even if you're sitting in a chair like I am, just out in front of you, and see if you can spread your toes apart like I'm doing with my fingers right now. You really do want to see the toes being able to get away from each other. If they stay really tight and you can't get them apart, or even if they're kind of lapping over each other, that is a sign that they could use a little bit of intervention, which these tips will definitely help with that. Also, go ahead and look at your foot and see how high the arch of your foot is. So definitely a factor of this is genetic. Some people are just going to have higher arches than others, but definitely the practices and types of shoes that you wear do play an effect on the arch as well. There have been studies that have shown that when people change their routines around and their footwear, that the arches actually do get higher for people. So just to briefly mention why we want our feet to look like this in the first place is because we want that bone structure and those muscles to be correct, be on point, be strong. Having the higher arches and the spreadable toes, wider set toes, does help with all the things that feet are supposed to help with. Weight distribution, shock absorption, just your overall balance, leverage, and flexibility. It all starts with your feet. So do the test, assess where your feet are, and here are a few tips to help improve from where you are currently. So first off, do as much as you can barefoot. Of course, there's so many different circumstances people have in their lives, but if you're somebody that even around your own house has either shoes or slippers on all the time, then definitely start being barefoot more. If you can get outside at all to be barefoot, definitely recommend that. And if you're somebody that does indoor workouts, then definitely do them barefoot too. That's a great way to kind of train your feet to get in a better positioning for balancing the rest of your body, for stabilizing you. Just like you train any other part of your body for better posture or to do a task better, you want to do the same thing with your feet. So if you have the shoes on all the time, then it's going to be hard for your feet to really do anything because it's contained, and depending on the type of shoe too, even more so. But allowing your feet and your toes to really almost grip to the surface while you're doing tasks, while you're doing workouts especially, it really helps build that muscle memory and also just the actual strength of your feet. So secondly, really try to limit the shoes with the really narrow toe boxes, with the heels. There are shoes out there that their toe boxes are more normal to wider, that aren't necessarily barefoot shoes. So really look to see what's out there. If you're wearing really cramped shoes all the time, that is the top reason for leading to bunions and just that crowding of the toes, not that spreadable. And wearing heels all the time puts so much more pressure in the front of your foot. It's just a weird position for your foot to be walking around in all the time. It really throws those muscles off. And on top of that, try to really think about what kind of environment, what you're going to be doing before you choose the shoes. For example, just thinking on the top of the brain, maybe you're going to a concert and you're going to be up around and dancing. Of course, you want to look cute, I'd assume, or look handsome. You want to look nice for the concert you're going to. But maybe don't wear like this super high heel cowgirl boots with this small toe box and the heels. Like, maybe that looks cute, and I'm not saying you can never wear shoes like that if you want to, but especially in an environment where you're going to be up around, hopping around, dancing on your feet, that's just a really poor choice. Think of it the same way like you wouldn't wear flip-flops to go on a hike through the mountains. At least you probably shouldn't, because you could slip on rocks and cut your feet. I would really think about the things you're doing and be really strategic with it. And when you're forming an outfit around it, maybe start from the feet up, because so much of how we carry ourselves and our body overall starts at the feet too. And thirdly, it is great to understand some of the anatomy of the foot. Of course, you don't have to, but if you're into health and just science and stuff like that interests you, diving into learning, there is so much anatomy that comes to the foot that is so interesting. There are so many different pressure points on the foot that when you press, you can feel it in way different parts of the body. Super, super interesting. I'm not going to dive super into that science of it, but if you're interested, you should definitely just go down that path. But really educating yourself about how a healthy foot is supposed to look, from the muscles to the bones. A little bit of self-massage goes a long way. I always recommend learning some points on yourself for when you have muscle stress so that you can release it yourself. One great way that you can is have something like a tennis ball, and even if you're sitting at like a desk job or something, or when you're at home, you can sit and roll the tennis ball under your foot, under that arch and all around there, and it hits some of those points and really helps relax some of those muscles. But if you're ever having a problem, maybe look to the foot as well and see if there's any points in and around your foot area, maybe your ankles as well, that you can give a little bit of a massage, a little press. Pressing and holding the pressure points is the best way to release them, opposed to like kneading or anything like that. And you could be very surprised with how much keeping things balanced in the foot helps the things up above the foot as well. So my advice is definitely research some reflexology, and just so you know, there's kind of more studied and less studied versions of reflexology. Like, I'm not necessarily convinced that there's a certain pressure point in the toe that leads right to your brain or your sinuses, but there's definitely connections to all the muscles from the foot to some regard. So definitely do some research, check it out, and play around with it. But those are some basic tips for just starting to improve that foot health, so you don't have to go down the route of immediately throwing away all your sneakers, buying only barefoot shoes if you don't want to, especially if this is something completely new or foreign to you. Make some of these little changes in your life and habits first, because a lot of the injury does come from people going from more side of one extreme to the other, and most of the time with all things, the best area is somewhere in the middle. I'm really curious what you think of this video. Is this something that you've thought about a lot, you've seen a lot about, or have you never really thought about foot health before, and is this something completely new for you to ponder? I love coming across things that I had never really even thought about before, but then I can think about it, and it's so much fun. But if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to join this community of like-minded folks, and give this video a like if you liked it. I put out a video every single Monday, always relating around simple, natural, healthy living. So if that interests you, I do hope you will stick around. But that is going to do it for me today, so I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.